I slammed my car door shut with more force than I intended, my heart already pounding before I even took a step toward my parents' front door. There was this uneasy knot inside my stomach, that feeling of dread that creeps up right before something big and messy happens. Something told me this day was going to be the day that changed everything, my relationships, my future wedding, possibly my entire life. I hadn't seen my parents in a while, not since they started dropping subtle hints about finances being tight. But I never in my wildest dreams imagined that my carefully saved, lovingly accumulated wedding fund had been used for my brother's divorce settlement. And now that I knew, I couldn't keep it together any longer. I marched up the path, ignoring the bright, cheerful flowers my mother always planted along the walkway. It felt almost insulting how lovely and inviting they looked, given the storm raging in my mind. The doorbell sounded unnaturally loud, and I heard footsteps approaching. It was my father who opened the door, wearing an expression that was somewhere between welcoming and anxious. He must have sensed my mood instantly because his welcoming smile flickered and faded around the edges. "Dad," I said, my voice deceptively calm for all the fury inside me. "Aaron," he sighed, stepping back to let me in. "You might as well come inside." The living room was the same as always. Warm taupes on the walls, plush sofa that had seen better days, and the mantel stuffed with family pictures. Except now, everything felt off-kilter. My mother was perched on the edge of the couch, her hands twisted together in her lap, giving me this same uneasy smile. Her eyes darted to my father, then back to me. Before I said anything, I glanced around. I half expected my older brother, Brad, to be lurking in a corner, but apparently he wasn't here, or he was hiding. As I set my purse down on the coffee table, I took a slow breath, trying to keep control. My mother patted the couch cushion next to her, an invitation I ignored. Instead, I took a stance a few feet away, arms folded. I forced myself to speak calmly. "I want to know if it's true." I stared at my mother, then at my father. "Did you two really drain my wedding fund to pay for Brad's divorce settlement?" A flicker of guilt crossed my mother's face. My father looked down at his shoes. That was all the confirmation I needed. My blood rushed in my ears, and for a moment, my vision blurred. I could practically feel my heart rate skyrocketing. My mother tried to calm me. "Aaron, sweetie, let's talk about this rationally. Your brother was in a terrible situation. His wife was bleeding him dry, and it doesn't matter what situation he was in," I hissed, voice trembling with anger. "You had no right to touch my wedding fund. You promised me. My entire life, you said I'd have a nest egg for when I got married. That was my money. You encouraged me to deposit my own savings into it, and I did." Dad opened his mouth, but I held up a hand to stop him. They looked at each other again, as if passing a silent message. He finally cleared his throat. "Your brother, he was going to lose his house. His ex-wife demanded an astronomical payout, and that's not my problem." I practically yelled, my voice echoing in the room. I was sure the neighbors could hear if they tried. "I didn't care. You told me from the time I was a kid that there was money set aside for me for the day I got married. You said we could have the wedding of our dreams. And now you're telling me you spent it on a divorce?" Mom's eyes glistened, but her face hardened a moment later. "We didn't have a choice, Aaron. He's your brother, and family helps family. We had to act fast or else he could have been in more trouble." I stared at them incredulously. "So you threw me under the bus to bail him out? You took something that belonged to me and my fiancé, something we counted on, and gave it to your golden child, because God forbid Brad ever face the consequences of his own mistakes." My mother's cheeks reddened. She stood up, tugging at her cardigan sleeves. "We are not playing favorites, Aaron. You're twisting this all out of proportion. We love you both. We just thought you would understand." "Understand?" I spat, letting the word hang there. "And what am I supposed to do about my wedding now? It's in 6 months. Deposits, reservations, everything's half-planned. We've already been telling friends and relatives the date. What do I do? Just walk away from all of that? This is thousands of dollars we're talking about, Mom, thousands." Dad made a helpless gesture. "We've been meaning to talk to you about that. We wanted to discuss maybe scaling back. Perhaps you and Nathan could do something smaller." more modest. In fact, he continued with forced brightness. Why not just elope? You don't need a big wedding to be happy. Everything inside me froze. That word rang out in my head. Elope. So easy for them to say after draining the fund. Elope. I repeated, my voice trembling more than ever. Are you even listening to yourselves? You took my money, my fiancé's money, and then told me to elope. My father tried to gather some confidence. It's just that these days, weddings can be so overpriced. You two love each other, right? Love is all that matters. I felt something snap. Are you actually guilt-tripping me about wanting a wedding? You wanted a big wedding for me too, remember? You made me browse venues. We looked at all those dresses. This was your dream as much as it was mine. So what changed? Because your son messed up, I suddenly lose everything. They both looked away. My mother murmured, we just couldn't see him struggling. And, well, your wedding fund had enough money to bail him out. She said that last part so softly, like it was an afterthought. But to me, it was a lightning bolt. They'd done the math and decided to sabotage my future because it was enough for Brad's mistakes. I could almost see my reflection in the mirror across the room. My face was flushed with anger, tears threatening to break free, my jaw set with rage. I took a step back. I'm getting out of here. I can't even look at you two right now. My father took a few pleading steps forward. Aaron, wait. But I was already grabbing my purse off the table and heading for the door. No, I snapped. I came here for an explanation, and I got one. You don't have anything else I want. I wrenched open the door and stepped out into the fading afternoon sunlight, chest heaving. They followed me to the door, calling my name, but I simply slammed it shut behind me and headed to my car, ignoring their attempts to make me come back. When I slid into the driver's seat, I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, the anger swirling inside me. I took a moment to calm my shaking hands, trying to steady my breathing. My fiancé, Nathan, was waiting at our apartment, probably worried sick about how this confrontation would go. We had suspected something was off with my parents for a while, missed calls, weird hints about finances, but I never expected this. I turned the key, ignoring the tears that stung my eyes, and drove off, my mind already trying to figure out how I would possibly explain this to him. Nathan greeted me at the door of our place as soon as I arrived. The concern on his face melted into anger and sorrow the moment he saw mine. Without a word, he gathered me into his arms. I buried my face into his chest, letting the tears come for a brief moment. There, in the hallway of our apartment, I let myself be vulnerable because I was safe with him. He stroked my hair gently. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I know how much that money meant to us. I took a shaky breath. They used it all, Nathan. Every penny. They paid for Brad's divorce settlement, and now they're basically telling us to elope. His jaw hardened. I'd seen him upset before, but never so outraged. That's unbelievable. They had no right to do that to you. He pulled back to look at me. I know how important it was for you to have that beautiful wedding. You've dreamed of it for so long. I nodded, voice trembling. You're my dream, I murmured, forcing a tiny, watery smile. But yes, I wanted something special with our friends and family to celebrate. I was counting on that fund to cover a big chunk of it. I don't even know where to go from here. Nathan's features softened. We'll figure it out. But first things first, how did they react when you confronted them? I recapped every painful detail. Dad's explanation, Mom's tearful justification, how they basically told me that if I really loved Nathan, I'd just get married without all the fuss. Nathan's face was stone cold when I finished. He took a deep breath to calm himself. They can't get away with this. I swiped at the tears in my eyes. It's not like I can make them pay me back. The money is gone. They're not exactly rolling in excess cash. They probably used whatever retirement savings they had left to fix my brother's mess. They told me there's nothing left for me. Not a single dime, Nathan. He squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. I have some savings of my own, but not enough to cover the wedding you want. We can see about a smaller ceremony, but let's not make any hasty decisions tonight. Why don't we just take some time to breathe, maybe talk to your brother, see what on earth happened that made him need so much money? I hesitated. I doubt he'll be sympathetic, but maybe it's worth a shot. I just can't believe he didn't think twice about taking money from me. Nathan pulled me close again. You're not alone in this, Aaron. I'm right here with you. The emotion in his voice, anger and protectiveness, made me cling to him. I felt a surge of gratitude that at least I had him in my corner. We stood there for a few moments, letting the tension swirl between us. Finally, I said, I need some air. I'm going to call Brad and see if he'll talk to me. We both knew how that might go, but we also knew I needed answers. I stepped out onto our small apartment balcony and dialed Brad's number. He picked up on the third ring, sounding oddly cheerful. My stomach twisted into knots. Hey sis, he said, as though everything was perfectly normal. I cut to the chase. Did you know Mom and Dad used my wedding fund to pay for your divorce settlement? A pause, and I could almost hear his grin fade. They told me they had some emergency cash set aside, he said at length, choosing his words carefully. I didn't ask a lot of questions. I let out a disbelieving laugh. Right. So you're telling me you suspected nothing? He sighed. Look, Aaron, I'm sorry if that money was originally yours. But I was in a tight spot. My ex-wife was demanding a huge settlement. And you know how Mom and Dad are. Once they decide to help, you can't talk them out of it. Honestly, it never occurred to me it was the same fund for your wedding. I bristled. That's a convenient story. I heard him shift uncomfortably on the other line. Well, what do you want from me? If I didn't get the settlement paid, she was going to take me to court. Maybe I'd lose my job because of all the stress. Maybe I'd lose my car. It could have been worse, so when Mom and Dad said they'd cover it, I took the offer. Without asking any questions, I accused. Without considering it might put me in a horrible position. He was silent for a moment. What's done is done, he said finally, in a clipped tone. I can't undivorce my wife. And Mom and Dad can't just produce that money out of thin air. If you're mad, be mad at them. They told me it was leftover savings. They never once said, oh, by the way, this is Aaron's wedding fund. My fury spiked. So you didn't know at first, but now you do, and you sound pretty comfortable benefiting from my stolen money. Stolen is a strong word, he retorted, though I could hear a slight wavering in his voice. You're being dramatic. I don't have a time machine to go fix this. Just calm down. You and Nathan can still tie the knot. Doesn't need to be fancy. I nearly shrieked into the phone. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. And don't talk about my wedding like it's just some party I can toss aside. You know how important this is to me. You have to realize I've been planning my wedding almost my entire life. I'm your sister. Don't act like I'm being dramatic about something I poured my hopes, dreams, and savings into. He huffed. I get it, okay? I do. But it's done. Nothing can be done about it now. I bit back a scream. You could pay me back. You could talk to Mom and Dad about making it right. You could do something other than shrug. He gave a heavy sigh. I don't have the money, Aaron. And Mom and Dad certainly don't right now. If I could make it magically reappear, I would. But I can't. Honestly, I gotta go. I'm sorry this happened, but I've got my own problems. He hesitated, then added, it's not like I wanted any of this. A flame of anger flickered behind my eyes. But I didn't have the emotional energy to scream at him further. Goodbye, Brad, I said tightly and hung up. I let the phone slip from my ear, closing my eyes against the hot tears building again. My brother was so dismissive, so eager to move on now that he was free of the financial burden. Meanwhile, everything I'd hoped for was up in flames. Nathan joined me on the balcony, gently rubbing my back. How did it go? He asked quietly. I shook my head. Exactly how you'd expect. He claims ignorance and basically told me I'm overreacting. Nathan's brow furrowed. You're not overreacting. They're all in the wrong here. You deserve to be angry. I turned to face him fully, my tears threatening to spill over again. But anger won't fix this. We already booked the venue. We put down deposits. I don't have enough to cover the rest, and it's only 6 months away. My parents ruined it in one fell swoop. He grabbed my hands, holding them between his. Maybe we can still salvage something. Even if it's smaller than we originally planned, it can still be beautiful. And we can do it on our own terms. I don't want them controlling you anymore. If they want to see us get married, They can show up as guests if you even want them there. I pressed my lips together, a wave of relief washing over me that he was so supportive. You mean you'd be okay if we scale down? I don't want to bury ourselves in debt just to keep the original plan. Nathan nodded earnestly. Absolutely. I care more about being your husband than having some fancy reception. Let's think this through. You must have some money saved beyond that wedding fund, and I have some too. Maybe we can talk to your Aunt Lily, the one who always said she'd love to host an event in her big backyard. Or we pick a smaller venue for the ceremony. We have a small reception for the people who really matter. That's it. My heart warmed a little at the thought. It wasn't the grand wedding I had pictured, with the open bar and the big dance floor and the full catering, but maybe we could still have something sweet and meaningful. I love that idea, I said softly, hugging him. I just never expected that I'd be replanning everything last minute because my own parents sabotaged me. He wrapped his arms around me. I know. It's awful. But I'm here. I'm going to help you. The tension in my chest loosened just enough for me to breathe properly again. I nodded, feeling a sense of determination stir beneath all that anger. Let's do this then. We'll plan a smaller wedding on our terms, and they can keep their elope suggestion to themselves. We stepped back inside, flipping on the lights in our cozy living room, and started brainstorming. Nathan took out a notepad, jotting down potential ways we could cut costs, smaller guest list, maybe a potluck style or simpler catering, or a backyard wedding with a friend's band, or just a good music playlist. We bounced ideas back and forth, and for the first time all evening, I felt a spark of hope. This was ours, after all, no one else's. We could shape it however we wanted. But that anger, that betrayal, still burned deep. As we scribbled notes, I found myself checking the clock. Only 5 p.m.? This day felt like it had lasted an eternity. I replayed Mom and Dad's voices in my head, how they had basically told me to scale back and just be happy with love. I knew I should try to calm down, but the betrayal was too raw. Nathan picked up on that energy. Take a break, he suggested gently. You've had a really rough day. Let me run out to grab some takeout. We'll do something easy for dinner, maybe watch a movie and talk more later. I agreed, though I couldn't quite shake the turbulence in my chest. While he was gone, I wandered the apartment, glancing at the clutter of bridal magazines I'd collected on the coffee table. They were supposed to be my guides for the next 6 months, filled with circles and bookmarks of everything I'd wanted. Now it all seemed like a cruel joke. My parents had known how meticulously I planned. They'd helped me pick out half the ideas in those magazines. And then they'd poured my entire fund down the drain in a single day, as if all those wedding dreams were worthless compared to my brother's problems. I paced the living room, occasionally scrolling through the wedding budget spreadsheets on my laptop. Though I tried not to mention it, I had all my planning meticulously organized in a folder. Each line of expenses, from the flowers to the photographer, stared back at me like a list of broken promises. My chest tightened again, and I quickly closed the document. Maybe a little mindless TV would keep me from stewing. The door opened and Nathan returned with some warm takeout. He set it on the kitchen island, greeting me with a gentle smile. Chinese okay? I nodded and forced a small grin. Perfect. We ate in relative silence, the day's events replaying in my head. Every so often, I caught him glancing at me with sympathy in his eyes, and I'd reach across to squeeze his hand. For all the anger swirling inside me, I felt gratitude, too. Gratitude that he and I were on the same page, that he wasn't blaming me or pressuring me to just suck it up. After dinner, I felt a wave of exhaustion crash over me. It was only early evening, but the emotional turmoil had drained me. Nathan suggested we go for a short walk around the block to clear our heads. The sky was a deepening indigo, and the air had that crisp coolness that always reminded me it was nearing fall. We strolled in silence for a while, our hands entwined. Slowly, the tension seeped out of my shoulders. Finally, I murmured, I think I should talk to them again before I make a final decision. Maybe tomorrow or whenever I can handle it. I want them to see that I'm not just going to forget this betrayal. But also, I don't want to walk down the aisle full of hatred. I need some sort of closure, even if they can't fix what they did. Nathan nodded. I'll support you. but don't let them trample over your feelings. They owe you an apology, a serious one. I took a breath of the cool evening air. I know. We headed back inside, the tension returning ever so slightly, a reminder that this day was not going to resolve itself easily. But I told myself that tomorrow was another day, a day to either confront them one last time or decide to move on. We cleaned up our takeout boxes, flicked on the TV for some background noise, and curled up on the couch together, saying little but finding comfort in each other's presence. Eventually, we drifted off to bed, though my mind still simmered with anger and heartbreak. Early the next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination. I let Nathan sleep in. He deserved the rest after the emotional roller coaster, while I showered, got dressed, and decided to see if my parents might be more open to a real conversation now that a night had passed. If I was going to start replanning my wedding, I wanted to do it free of resentment. But that would require at least some effort from them to acknowledge how badly they'd hurt me. I drove over to my parents' house again. The early sunlight painted the road in a gentle glow, making the suburban neighborhood look almost peaceful. My stomach fluttered with nerves as I pulled into their driveway. Here I was, in the same spot as yesterday, but feeling a different mix of emotions. Still anger, yes, but also a flicker of determination to get answers, and maybe a shred of an apology. My father answered the door again, looking more tired than the night before. He stepped aside wordlessly to let me in. In the living room, my mother was pacing with a cup of coffee in her hand, circles under her eyes. They both looked at me expectantly. I took a seat in the armchair, perched forward like I was ready to bolt at any second. Well, I began, forcing a calm tone. I'm here. I want to talk like adults, even though what you did was beyond belief. My voice cracked only slightly. I want to know if you have anything else to say. They exchanged a look. My mother closed her eyes for a moment, shoulders slumping. Aaron, she said softly, I'm sorry. I really am. None of this was meant to hurt you. My father nodded, clearing his throat. We know how it must look. But we love you. We just felt cornered. Brad was in a terrible spot and I guess we made a hasty decision. Hasty? You had months to see this coming, I retorted quietly, though I appreciated the attempt at an apology. I need to hear you say that you understand how big a betrayal this is. This isn't just some inconvenience. It's my wedding, my money, my future, and you never even asked me. My mother ran a trembling hand through her hair. You're right. I should have called you, but we were embarrassed. We were scared. Your brother came to us in crisis, talking about how he could lose everything, maybe even risk jail time if his ex claimed he was hiding assets. I don't know all the details. We only wanted to keep the family from falling apart. I shot her a bitter look. In trying to keep him from falling apart, you dismantled my trust in you. She bowed her head. My father sighed. We know we messed up. We can't undo what's been done, but for what it's worth, we realize how badly we handled this. I felt a bubble of frustration rising, but also a strange sense of relief that they finally owned up to it, somewhat. So where do we go from here? I have 6 months before my wedding. I'm out most of the money I needed, and you're telling me you have no way to pay it back. Are you at least going to help in some other way? Mom stared at me, then looked at Dad, who nodded. Yes, she said firmly. Anything you need, help with decor, cooking, arrangement, errands, we'll pitch in. We can talk to relatives about chipping in too. I swallowed hard, uncertain how to respond. I'm rethinking the wedding, doing it smaller, more personal. Nathan and I will figure it out. But it's going to be on our terms, and I want you to know this changes things between us. I'm hurting, and I'm not sure if I can just put on a brave face and pretend everything's fine. My mother's eyes glistened with tears. I understand, she whispered. I hate that you're hurting. I'm so sorry. Dad took a slow step toward me. We can't fix the financial part, but I promise we'll be there for you any other way you need. I stared at them for a few seconds, torn between anger and the longing for some sense of family. Finally, I rose to my feet, crossing my arms. I appreciate the apology, I said, but I'm not going to forget this. I'm going to get married to Nathan, and it's going to be wonderful. If you want to be a part of that, you'll show me with your actions. Words only go so far. They nodded in subdued agreement. My mother tried to give me a hug, but I gently stepped back. I need time, I said, my voice catching. She looked crestfallen, but I couldn't force a tender moment that wasn't there yet. I turned to leave. As I walked out, my father called softly, Aaron, we do love you. So much. I paused at the door, not looking back. I hope so, I managed, then stepped outside. The morning sun felt a bit too bright for my mood, but somehow I felt a small weight lift from my chest. That conversation, though painful, was better than the fight we'd had the day before. There was a chance for healing in the future if they showed they truly meant it. On my way back, I stopped by a local bakery to pick up some pastries. Nathan was stirring in the kitchen when I returned, and he greeted me with a kiss on the forehead. You went out early, he said, eyeing me. Everything okay? I set the pastries on the counter. I want to talk to my parents again. They apologized, sort of. They can't replace the money, but they're willing to help in other ways. My voice wavered. I'm still upset, but at least they acknowledged how badly they messed up. Nathan studied me. How do you feel about that? I paused, choosing my words. I'm still hurt, but at least I know they realize they betrayed me. I guess that's something. Anyway, I still want to go forward with our new plan, something smaller, more intimate. He smiled. I'm ready whenever you are. We spent the rest of that morning and early afternoon brainstorming, making calls, trying to see if we could get deposits back from the extravagant venue we'd first booked. We needed to contact the caterer, the florist, and various other vendors to explain the change of plans. It wasn't exactly a fun process. There were cancellation fees. We had some awkward phone calls. But step by step, we dismantled the large wedding and started shaping a smaller, more personal celebration. We decided we'd hold it in Aunt Lily's sprawling backyard, which she generously offered to let us use. She was thrilled at the idea of hosting. We limited the guest list to immediate family and close friends, maybe around 50 people instead of the original 200. My best friend, Lydia, offered to handle a simplified catering plan where we'd serve hearty appetizers, fresh salads, and a small buffet instead of a lavish sit-down dinner. By mid-afternoon, a sense of relief spread through me. I started to see how this new wedding might actually be even more meaningful. It wouldn't be glitzy, but it'd be uniquely ours, free from the tension of trying to impress distant relatives. Nathan and I joked about how we could buy cheap, fun decorations online or ask friends to help make them. His cousin was a talented baker who'd offered to do a small two-tier cake at cost. It felt good to see people come together to help us make something special. But a lingering question remained. Would I even invite my parents? The thought of them smiling at the ceremony when they'd been the ones to sabotage it all made me feel a little ill. Yet, they were still my parents. Despite everything, a lifetime of memories pulled at my heart. I was conflicted. As the sun started to set again on this tumultuous day, I found myself leaning against the kitchen counter, staring at my phone. My mother had texted me a simple message earlier in the afternoon. We love you. We want to be a part of your day. We'll help any way we can. It was a small olive branch. I sighed, turning to Nathan. He looked up from the cluttered table of color swatches and guest lists. Hey, he said softly, you okay? I held up my phone. Mom wants to help. I still feel so betrayed, but they're my parents. Part of me wants to let them be part of it. The other part wants to shut them out until I can fully forgive. He came over, took my hand. You don't have to decide right this second. And remember, them being there doesn't mean you're fully letting go of how they hurt you. Maybe it's a step toward healing. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes again. You're right. I think I do want them there as guests. I don't want them controlling or paying for anything, but maybe just letting them witness our wedding will be enough. He squeezed my hand. Then that's what we'll do. And if at any point they behave badly, we can draw the line. A wave of gratitude for him washed over me. I nodded, determined. I'll text them a time and date. We're going ahead in Aunt Lily's backyard, and they can come as guests or not. But they'll understand that I'm not leaning on them financially anymore. So that's exactly what I did. My phone buzzed within minutes with my mother's excited and clearly relieved reply, promising they'd be there and they'd help set up chairs or do whatever was needed. I told them that's fine, but we're managing finances ourselves. They responded with heartfelt apologies again, which I accepted with caution. A little piece of me remained guarded, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Nathan and I were exhausted by the time evening rolled around. We'd done more planning in a day than most couples do in weeks, but it was paying off. We had a new wedding date circled, exactly 6 months away still, but in Lily's backyard. Our deposit had only partially been returned from the fancy venue, so that was a hit. But we'd already cut enough corners and had enough help from loved ones that we felt confident we could make it happen. We ordered another round of takeout, ironically from the same Chinese place, because neither of us had the energy to cook. Sitting on the couch with him, my head on his shoulder, I felt a strange mixture of weariness and excitement. Despite the day's drama, I felt closer to Nathan than ever. He'd stuck by me, helped me fix the near disaster, and never once tried to pressure me to just get it over with. He respected my wishes for a wedding I could still be proud of. Between bites of lo mein, I murmured, maybe this smaller wedding is for the best. I never wanted to go into debt or anything. I just wanted something special. And it'll still be special, right? He kissed my forehead. Absolutely. Because it's about us. And I have a feeling we'll remember this day not just for the chaos, but for how we stuck together through it. The tension in my chest eased a fraction. I love you, I whispered. I love you too, he said. And that's something no one can take from us. Not even your brother's divorce. I gave a small laugh at that. The day's events seemed so surreal. My parents' betrayal, my brother's nonchalance, the frantic replanning. All of it had somehow happened in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I'd woken up not knowing any of this. Now, here I was, forging an entirely new plan for my future. But life can change so fast. We let the conversation shift to lighter topics. We talked about Lily's backyard and how, in spring, it would be blooming with early flowers, how we might decorate the trees with little lights, how the guests could dance on the grass. My friend Lydia said she'd help me find a more affordable wedding dress if I needed it. The entire vision gave me hope. It was smaller, but it was still my dream in the way that counted. Then the phone rang, jarring me out of my reverie. I glanced at the caller ID and saw it was my brother. I hesitated but picked up. Hello? He sounded subdued. Aaron, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened with the money. I was silent a moment, not trusting myself to respond right away. Finally, I said, okay. I'm listening. He blew out a breath. Look, I realized how selfish I sounded yesterday. I guess I was so relieved to be out of my own mess that I didn't even consider how big a blow this would be for you. And then Mom called me, upset, saying how everything had gone down. She made me realize you put your own savings into that fund, too. I really am sorry I took advantage of it, even if I didn't fully realize it at the time. I felt tears burning the back of my eyes again. I appreciate the apology, I said quietly, but what's done is done. I'm not expecting you to pay me back, but just know it's left a big rift in our family. He cleared his throat, sounding guilty. I'm trying to get back on my feet after the divorce, but if I ever have enough money, I promise I'll pay you back something. I just can't guarantee a timeline. I closed my eyes, letting his words settle. Thanks, I said simply. I won't hold my breath, but thanks for saying that. My voice was calmer than I felt. I'm still planning to get married in 6 months, only now it'll be smaller. If you want to come, you can. But don't expect me to pretend this never happened. He was quiet for a moment. I understand, he said softly. I do want to be there to support you, if you'll let me. And if there's anything I can do, like help set up or run errands, I'll do it. For a second, I imagined my brother helping fold chairs or hang lights. It didn't erase my anger, but maybe it was a start. All right, I said, my voice thick. We'll see. I appreciate it, Brad. We said our awkward goodbyes, and I hung up, staring at my phone. Nathan touched my arm. That sounded productive? I shrugged, tears slipping down my cheeks at last. He apologized. He said he'd help. It doesn't fix everything, but maybe it's a step. I swiped at my tears. I hate crying over all of this, but I'm just relieved, I guess. Relieved they're all realizing they messed up. Nathan pulled me closer, resting his chin on the top of my head. You're handling this better than most people would. You're strong, Aaron. And you're gonna be an amazing bride. I smiled faintly, letting his comfort wash over me. The day had been so emotionally exhausting, but it was ending on a note I hadn't expected. There was still tension, still betrayal, but also a glimmer of hope that my family might repair itself bit by bit. They couldn't return the money, that was gone. But maybe we could still have a good wedding, a good life, and, in time, some semblance of trust again. I think we should finalize the new plan and send out an official notice soon, I said, stepping away to grab the notepad on the coffee table. I wanted to distract myself with something concrete. We have to contact all the guests we originally invited and let them know about the change in venue and size. Some of them we won't be able to include if we're cutting down drastically. That's going to be a hard conversation. Nathan exhaled. Yeah, but let's do it. We'll make sure everyone understands we're simplifying. It's not personal. We just can't accommodate everyone. We'll keep it short, sweet, and honest. We spent the next hour drafting a message that we'd eventually send or call to share with each guest on our original list, apologizing for the inconvenience, but explaining that we had personal reasons to scale down. By the end of it, my mind was fuzzy with exhaustion, but at least we had a plan. A day that started with heartbreak and betrayal was ending with a sense of direction. As we got ready for bed, I found myself staring at my ring, the symbol of my commitment to Nathan. It still shone with a quiet promise. No matter what storms raged around us, we had each other. My wedding might not be exactly what I'd once pictured, the big formal event I'd pinned so many hopes on, but it was going to be true to us. That knowledge gave me the courage to keep my head held high, even as the people who should have protected me ended up hurting me instead. Nathan climbed into bed beside me, and I snuggled up against him, feeling his warmth. I don't know how tomorrow will go. Or the next day, I whispered. But I know I want to marry you, no matter what. He turned off the bedside lamp, and in the cozy darkness, he found my hand. I want to marry you too. That's all that matters. I smiled in the darkness, blinking back the last wave of emotion. The day had started with shattered dreams, a confrontation I never wanted to have, and heartbreak that felt overwhelming. But here, lying beside the man I loved, I felt a sense of peace. Yes, I was still angry at my parents, still reeling from how they used my wedding fund to pay for Brad's divorce settlement. Yes, I wished it had never happened. But at least now I knew where everyone stood, and I had a plan to move forward without them controlling me. Despite the pain of betrayal, I fell asleep with a sense of resolve. My wedding would be smaller, but powerful in meaning, filled with the people who truly cared enough to show support. My parents would have to earn back my trust over time, and Brad might or might not ever repay me, but I wouldn't let them destroy my future. I had Nathan, and we were going to have a beautiful day, with or without their blessing. And so ended the longest, most draining day of my life. But tomorrow, I realized, would be a new beginning, a chance to shape my wedding, my future, and my happiness on my own terms. My final thought before sleep claimed me was a simple, comforting one. They might have taken my money, but they couldn't take away my love, nor the joy I would feel when I finally said, I do. And that, at the end of it all, was what truly mattered.